discussion of motion number 11, and we'll continue that discussion. Len, you had something?
Yes. Given that this is not a permanent position, that the candidate has not met all civil service requirements, I want the general public to understand that this is not a permanent appointment until the candidate has met all those requirements. I still feel very uncomfortable hiring someone with little to no experience in this position. This position is critical to the city staff, the city employees, and I don't take this decision lightly. It's weighed heavy on me for the last couple of weeks that we've had to deal with this. But I have a constituency to report to, and I have reached out to several community members, and they've given me my opinion, or their opinion on the situation, and they also feel very uncomfortable in hiring someone with little to no experience. So,
Further
Why don't you
discussion?
go into exec session?
Further discussion, anything?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I completely disagree with that. And since as I said before, I put my trust in the members of the staff and our city manager for the work they did in their interviews and their search and their reviews of all the candidates' resumes, something that nobody here in this room other than them did. So I'm prepared to vote yes on this.
And Scott, you have something?
I just want people to know where I'm coming from. My holdup is the money and the fact that it's not a permanent thing yet. And that's why I feel that, and that's always been my stance since this has started. And so that's when my answer comes out. I just want you, Joe, to know why.
Any further discussion? No. And you will know my opinion. I'm very much in support of this, and we'll move on to a vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie Shu? Aye. Councilmember Carson?
abstain.
Councilmember Harrington?
Abstain.
Councilmember Raptor?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco?
No.
And with that, the motion carries. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to, we'll move on to motion number 12. The Common Council approves the city administrator's designation of Justice Temming as Deputy Director of Finance. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, I'm sorry. For no additional compensation, I get it, effective October 26, 2022, until such time that a new Deputy Director of Finance is designated. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I have Dave, I'll go with. And do we have discussion? Luke?
I'd just like to reiterate that I have all the confidence in the world in Joe, and congratulations.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie Shu? Aye. Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Raptor?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco? Yes.
All right. Motion number 13, that the Common Council adopt the ordinance to amend Chapter 300-34 of the Code of the City of Oneonta entitled Fraternity, Sorority, and Membership Association Houses, which was laid on the desk of the Common Council on September 26, 2022, and would provide revised standards and regulations associated with fraternity, sorority, and membership association houses. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Katie, followed by Dave. And discussion? None? And with that, we'll call the vote.
Councilmember Murphy?
Aye.
Councilmember Davies?
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yes.
Councilmember LaPartie Shu? Aye. Councilmember Carson?
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yes.
Councilmember Raptor?
Yes.
Councilmember Falco? Aye.
Very good. Now, we'll go to our quarterly staffing update, take it away.
This was shared with the council as an attachment to the agenda. If you'd like, I can certainly go through page by page
desire to go through this on a page-by-page basis?
Answer questions.
Yeah, Craig, I know all of these positions are important. Are there any particular areas that you think are a priority? Or that we as a council could help you to fill?
I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, but as far as how the council can help us fill them, other than, of course, spreading the word when we have vacancy,
Sure.
when we have openings. You know, we do still have, we're always looking for bus drivers, although we're in a little better position than we have been we do have some appointments that were already approved tonight, which is a good thing. And this is last update, I updated this originally for the finance committee on October 11th, so there's some things that have changed on there. You know, it's always difficult recruiting police officers, and I shouldn't say always, in recent times, it's been very difficult recruiting police officers and firefighters. Certainly getting the word out about that, more, you know, recruiting police is big, but right now we're down in both those areas, so that's really, I think, those two areas, if we can get full staff consistently, that would be great. DPW is also struggling to stay at full staff throughout the year, although I think we're getting pretty, a little bit closer, but it's one step forward and at least one step back, it seems to be, there is some turnover. So yeah, no one particular area that really stands out, but yeah.
Didn't mean to throw you, thanks, Greg.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
Any other questions for Greg or discussion on this? All right, there's no motion to come of this, so we'll move on then, if everyone is satisfied with this, to the budget discussion. So we'll move on to the budget discussion.
Okay, so as you know, we've been through a bit of a process today. It started in July of this year, as it does every year. We took a little different approach this year. We went through several essentially strategic planning sessions with the council to discuss. We had department heads come in, explain their operations. We defined the 72 areas of our operation. We gave ourselves scores. We called it a level of service that we thought we were providing, 1 through 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. Obviously, it's a relative score, and it's somewhat anecdotal. It's not based on certain metrics and that sort of thing. That wasn't the point. Ultimately, what we came to is hopefully a better understanding by everyone on council what it is we're providing and what our areas of struggle may be, and maybe some reasons as to why we're struggling in certain areas, whether it's we're limited by the resources we have, whether it's staffing or funding for projects or materials or equipment or whatever it may be. And then we had council go through individually and then compiling that into a collective rating of what are the council's priorities. The council came up with 25 high priorities, as I recall them, the others being a little bit lower on the list, but not necessarily low priorities. You know, we asked the council, are you interested in increasing, maintaining, or decreasing each level of service for each service? There was no interest collectively, no agreement in decreasing anything. Most things were maintained. There was 25 that were increased. So the way I look at that is, realistically, we can all agree that we're not going to be able to increase 25 areas and maintain everything else when we can't. You know, when we have the budget struggles that we do. But when you look at that, we have 25 clear priorities above the rest. That's something that we use as department heads and staff in informing our budget requests. We try to fill those out in a way, you know, however possible, to try to make sure that those 25 priorities were being addressed. So we've gone through that process. As you know, and may recall from last year, and every year, the general fund is always the big nut to crack when it comes to balancing the budget. The request this year, we're over $6 million over our anticipated revenues. Initially, we went through and made, you know, some revisions. You know, went through the process sitting with the department heads. They talked with their staff. We came back. We were able to cut things down. At this point, we have, and Jenny will go into a little bit more detail on those numbers in just a minute here. But at this point, we're down to about a $1 million deficit in general fund. Sewer and water, we were able to get to a point of being balanced. after having each of them having several $100,000 deficit to start. The cuts that were made, and this isn't, we're not just cutting wish list items, we're not cutting, I think I made the point to the mayor and a couple others. You couldn't go through this budget with a finer tooth comb. I literally cut $100 from the common council's budget to replace nameplates, because I'm expecting all of you to be here next year. We don't need to spend that. You could not look at this in any more finer detail than we have looked at it, myself, Ginny, and all the department heads. So it's not as though there's a lot of little areas of waste where we can really slim down. We've made cuts where we can, and we've cut things that really would be useful. I mean, we had a break-in over the weekend of the Parks building, which is the second time, I think, in the last few years, but we've cut our security, door, and camera upgrades for that building and other buildings that we've been talking about for, I think, since the previous council, because that's not something that is 100% essential to providing the services that we're currently providing. That's the other value of having those services listed when we're looking at making these cuts. What is essential to make these services happen? And that might not be essential. There are other things like that where you can certainly make an argument why that should be considered essential, or that is something we should do. But we've had to make some difficult decisions. Even still, in the general fund, we're down to still $1 million deficit. I'm gonna let Ginny jump in and to talk a little bit more about the specifics on that, if you'd like.
Okay, thanks, Greg. As Greg said, when we started this budget, we had over a $6 million deficit from the general fund, and now we're down to 1.1. We had a deficit of over $513,000 in the water fund. That budget is now currently balanced without any fund balance. And we had over $237,000 deficit in the sewer fund, and that is now currently balanced. I just want to go over some of the revenue highlights for
Gene,
you.
real quick, is this deficit with a 2% tax increase still, is that?
It takes it to the tax cap, yes.
And then we're still 1.1,
Yep, and I'll explain.
Okay.
I'll explain it as we go.
thank you, sorry.
No, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. And then you got an email, everything except for some reports that I did today. What's in your budget binder, you got electronically. But I wanted to provide everybody with the budget binder so they could read it on paper, make notes, look at what was there, what we cut. You're gonna see the request column, then you're gonna see the preliminary column, so you'll know everything that Greg and I and the department heads cut from the original request. And I would just like to go over some of the highlights. The general fund, the property taxes were increased to the limit, which raised an additional a little over $116,000. We increased sales tax by $125,000. We increased the utilities gross receipt tax by $25,000. Other public safety income from the code enforcement office we increased by $20,000. Our ambulance revenue, I actually decreased it by $5,000. The average billable ambulance calls have decreased to under 2,000 calls per year. And we're currently collecting about $458 per call. So as of with the data I have right now, I don't feel comfortable raising the ambulance budget. We increased the Parks and Recs fees by $12,500. The town fire protection services was increased by a little over $31,000. This is formula based. And interest earnings, I increased by $30,000 because the interest rates are going up. Parking fines, we increased by $15,000. That mainly is because of the snow removal in fees, increase in fees that we made last year. Sale of equipment, we increased by $25,000. We're anticipating surplusing a DPW paver, and we're going to put the minimum bid at $25,000 for it. Mortgage tax, we increased by $20,000. Interfund transfers were decreased by almost $85,000. That was because last year we had budgeted to transfer money from the community development funds over to the general fund. So our total revenues increased a net of $345,000. But as you get down into the expenditures, our expenditures increased over $1.3 million. And we'll get into those details. The water fund, in line with our long-term plan, our revenues included 10% increase via the water rates. And the water fund, I just want to remind everybody, still owes the general fund $370,000 for the Catella well repair. The sewer fund, in line with our long-term plan, revenues include a 10% increase via the sewer rents. And we also were able to increase the septic dumping fees by $35,000. And I also gave you some information there on the general fund restricted reserves. Showed you what we used in our preliminary budget to be used from the reserves. Heavy equipment, for the highway equipment, we're asking for the council to approve $240,000 for a dump truck with a plow and a sander. And the IT reserve, we created that reserve last year knowing that we were gonna have some major IT upgrades. And 2023, we have to upgrade all 3 of our servers. That's a cost of a little over $62,000. The public safety, $62,500 for a police vehicle, plus $25,000 for the fire department's extrication equipment. From the repair reserve, $26,000 for the Wilbur Park Pool Pump House and sand filter media. And from the streets and sidewalks, $40,000 for sidewalk replacement. You will see when you go through the detail that we have a lot more in there for sidewalk work. We're going to be using CHIPS for that, and that will be into a capital project. So expenses, I just want to highlight where all of our expenses increased. Currently, Excella has proposed a 25% increase on our health insurance rates. And that's for the active employees, but the 65+ plan, there is no increase. We'll have the same rate as we did in 2022. Our health insurance brokers are attempting to negotiate with Excellus on the proposed rate increase. The current draft budget includes a 15% increase, and it increases the citywide budget by over $540,000, which for the general fund is over $423,000 just for health insurance. And just so you know, I've checked with the brokers on at competition, and all of the prices are coming in 40% above what we're currently paying, 24.4%, 25%. Some are not even bidding. So they've got their work cut out for them. And obviously, and I just want to mention this, that the city cannot sustain the cost of these health insurance coverages, and we need to coordinate with our unions. We need to explore ideas about how to get these costs down. And I just want to give you an example. If we were to decrease our health insurance premiums by 15%, it would save the general fund over $793,000. So that's just, I'm not saying that's going to be possible, but I just want to show you what that small of a decrease in rates would save us. And citywide, it would save us over $967,000 per year.
Katie?
Yeah, I just had
Yes.
a question about the health insurance, since you specifically mentioned exploring other options in your memo. Katie had mentioned during her time here, I think in the past year, exploring the option of, or the idea of a health insurance consortium with the county. And I just wondered if, like, that's anything that anyone has looked into. I am
Yeah,
not the person to- yeah.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up. We actually had a conversation with Alan Ruffles from the county just last week. He's setting up a meeting between us and the city, or the county's consultant. They've been working after looking at their health insurance. They're talking about health insurance consortium. So that was something that several of the counties have been talking about pre-pandemic, and then also kind of fell apart during the pandemic. That's what they referred to. There were talks in the past about it. So we're trying to, we offer staff, as the county's sort of 114 people right now in various departments. They're struggling with staffing as well. So we offer to partner with them however we can. Judy and I will try to help move that effort along if there is a possibility to pursue it, because as Katie had explained in the past, I think that's an opportunity that if it could come to fruition could really help save the city as far as health insurance costs. But anything that happens there is going to be probably years in the making. I don't really know, but it's not going to be something that comes together very, very quickly, I can imagine.
Okay.
But we're going to pursue it.
And also, any changes, this is all, we'd have to negotiate with all of the unions and make sure that everybody was on board. But I just want to point out that, and you're going to see later on, when I get into some numbers, how much this is affecting our budget.
Yeah, we provide a very great benefit to
Yes.
our employees and retirees, health insurance.
Yeah,
It's a
and
very
when
nice
that.
plan,
yeah.
and it's a very expensive plan.
brokers were here and they presented to council, they showed a comparison of how much better our plan is to very similar municipalities. And you have that presentation. And just to continue on the expenses, our city's various liability insurance policies are estimated to increase between 6 and 10%. And not included in this budget, which is something I would like us to seriously consider, is cyber insurance. It's about $25,000 annually, but I did not feel comfortable including it without discussing the cost with the council. The New York State retirement system rates increased an average of 1.4%. Now, just so you know where those percentages fall, for our police and fire, the average is about 30% of their annual salary has to be paid to the retirement system. For the ERS, about 16% has to be paid to the retirement system. Having a 1.4% increase is small compared to what it has been, but it's still, when you put it on top of our salary, it is a large number. New York State minimum wage increase went from $13.20 to $14.20, effective 12/31. So what we do on our part-time wage schedule, which we'll be bringing to council to approve, we adjust it to bring it up to the minimum, and then we have a range. And Greg has tweaked the schedule. We're not quite ready to present it to council, but we've incorporated all of those rate changes in the budget. The fuel budget has increased an average of over 47%. Now, we know that gas prices won't stay here. History has shown us that they go up and down and up and down, but as of right now, what I did is I took the average increase based on the U.S. Department of Energy, and I applied that increase to the average rate that we've been paying this year. We're very fortunate. We locked in our electricity and natural gas prices back in November of 2021, so those prices are locked through November of 2024. Our debt service increased only by $30,000 after issuing the bonds for the West Street and the street lighting project. And this has to do with timing. I've talked to you before about timing debt issuance. You try to make it so when you're taking on new debt, an old debt is being paid off. The sewer debt service increased $177,000. That was mainly due to financing for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. And also the sewer expense for biosolids removal has doubled since last year. And personnel services, the request included 13 full-time positions. And obviously we cannot bring 13 people on in a one-year time period. So, and also a combination of new part-time positions and increase in part-time hours was requested. After going through the request, Greg and I and department heads decided that we would include 2 full-time positions, an ordinance inspector for code enforcement, knowing that if this position was on, it would give the department more sources to do inspections, which would bring revenues into the city. And also a heavy equipment operator for the water and sewer plant. There is so much water and sewer work to be done that we thought it was vital to have this additional position. The part-time budget also includes a part-time emergency management administrator for the fire department, a part-time clerk for the central garage, and a part-time operator for the water treatment plant, and increased part-time hours in DPW. I mention these because these are new part-time positions that we haven't funded in the past. But what we were trying to do was to meet the current demands of the level of service and also the amount of workload we've had. And as we know, it's more economically feasible to do it with part-time. And so we thought that that was a good compromise between the 13 requests for the full-time positions. The full-time employees' salary increases are in the proposed budget per the union contracts, and we did estimates for the CSCA and sergeants because those contracts expire at the end of this year. And there's various base adjustments in the budget for non-union employees. And not included in this budget presentation is the position that we discussed for funding by grants to help Judy and the planning department. we will present that to you once we have more solid numbers as far as the cost of the position and how much we'll be able to fund through the grants.
Just to jump in on that, the intent of that position is not to be writing grants, but given the number of grants that we have received or are receiving, and the amount of money that's out there, particularly for infrastructure projects, we're gonna need people to help. And it really will help both community development and engineering, in administering and managing those projects. So it'll be like a project manager type position, we don't know the title at this point, but, the idea would be we take that admin money from those grants that we receive to pay for the position, so it would be no impact to the general.
Right, you'll see the expenditure for the position, but then you'll also see revenue coming in. It'll be under transfers from other funds because it will be coming from a grant. And then the revenue will offset the expenditure. The fire department's budget includes, the proposal includes 7,000 hours of overtime and 75,000 for training overtime. And I just want to make note, we will be bringing a budget adjustment to you at the next council meeting for an estimate for the overtime cost for 2022. Also, the budget includes 24 firefighters, 4 captains, plus the chief and the assistant chief. This allows for staffing of 4 7-man crews, the same as it was budgeted in 2022. The current problem is that we haven't been able to fully staff yet, but the recruitment is moving along. And we do see the original $6 million deficit, we removed in coordination with the department heads as much as we thought we could postpone. What currently remains in the proposed budget is the minimum needed to continue, what we believe is the minimum to continue providing the services that we currently provide. And to close the funding deficit, we're going to need to explore options together. And I just want to make note on the Oneonta Public Transit, during 2022 and projected for 2023, OPT will be realizing a deficit of approximately $405,000 and $698,000 respectively. We've got a 1.1 grant from CARES that will cover this. A lot of it has to do with payroll costs because we've increased the part-time bus drivers' pay for recruitment and retention, and also with fuel costs. And I've already been in contact with DOT as far as STOA aid and 5311 aid to cover those deficits in the future years. So that is being looked into, and when I get more information, I'll bring it forward.
Can I jump in on that one too, Jim?
Sure.
For a second? I think it's important to note that the general fund historically, probably a decade ago and longer, contributed regularly to the annual OPT budget. That went away for a while and is on its way to coming back unless we're able to increase our revenues or cut our costs somehow. Obviously, increasing ridership in OPT is a goal, and that's something that we'll be looking at, strategies to do that.
Yes, and we have started, part of the 2022 action plan was to increase revenues for OPT. When we have started that by increasing the contract stops, and we increased fares last year. But again, we're doing a slow and steady approach to it, so the public and the contracts can absorb it on a more gradual basis. And I just wanted to, I'm sorry if I feel like I'm hurrying, but I know you guys have been here for a really long time, so I just want to try to get through this. In your binder, what we have provided you, first is just a graph so you can just kind of see the makeup of the general fund proposed budget, the revenue sources, and the general fund expenses. You're familiar with this graph. This is provided every year to you. And then we provided the general fund summary of expenditure type. This time I included the request column in this report so you can see what the requests were versus what the preliminary budget is showing you. Again, there's a lot of information here. I'm hoping that you'll have time to study it. Give me your questions, and we can discuss it in more detail at the next budget meeting. And you will see, if you come down to the revenue sources, you will see that we're asking for $455,000 from the reserves, and that's what the reserves are set up for, is to fund those type of expenditures on an annual basis. But our deficit of $1.1 million from fund balance is to balance the budget. But to give you a little bit of history on that, if you turn the page, I went back to the year 2000. And you're going to see that I broke out the general fund budget by salaries, fringe benefits, fringe benefits for active employees, OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits, equipment, contractual debt service, and transfers to capital projects or other funds. The other funds was OPT. And you will see the percentages of how much was made in these categories of the budget. So salaries back in 2000 was just about 48% of the budget. 2022, salaries is about 41% of the budget. Fringe benefits for active employees back in 2000, it was just under 11%. It's now almost 23%. This is where I'm showing you that the health insurance costs are really impacting our budget. You will also see it with OPEB. Back in 2000, it was just under 7%. It's now over, 7.36%. Again, this is where a lot of the money is being absorbed right now in the increases. Equipment, you will see that the percentages stay pretty consistent. And contractuals, 24% in 2000, 22% in 2022. Debt service, we're still within our goal of being under 5% of our total budget. But what has been impacted because of the cost in the other areas is we are no longer transferring funds to our capital projects from our operating fund. Right now, what we're using to fund our capital projects for streets and whatnot is our CHIPS. And luckily, we were awarded the $740,000 from the state Turing, and that has greatly assisted us in the past 2 years of doing our street projects. And then on the next page, I did the same thing with revenues. I showed you the major revenue sources between tax levy, sales tax, ambulance, fire contracts, state aid, and then I showed you all other category, appropriated fund balance, and reserves. Again, this is a lot of information to absorb, but you will see how the percentages of our funding sources have changed or stayed consistent throughout that time period. And then to give you a little bit more detail on the revenues, the next page, I show you our tax levy history from 2000 to 2022. The property tax was signed into law of June 24, 2011. So you will see that since 2011, we have stayed within the tax cap formula. And we have raised an average of $77,000 per year since 2000, or 1.94%.
So with our formula, is 2% the highest we can go this year?
No, it depends on the formula, because you can get a growth factor, and you can also get I'm sorry.
You've been here just as well
Yeah.
longer than we have.
Yeah, so it, depending on what the state awards you, sometimes you can go over 2%.
Is there a chance that is there a good chance that we could potentially do that?
Not this year.
Okay.
You can always go over the tax cap by vote, and then I just have to explain to the state why you decided to go over the tax cap. But as far as if you want to stay within the tax cap, I will research to find out when the tax cap law first came out, if all the municipalities within the county stayed under the tax cap, a rebate was sent to all the homeowners. I do not know if that is still active, but I will find that out and I'll bring that information back to the council. Just so you know, if you do decide to go over the tax cap, what the ramifications would be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next one, this one is a little bit more informative. I know people have a lot of questions about our fund balances. I find this schedule very educational. What I've done for the general fund reporting here is I've broken it out into the categories that you will see on our audited financial statements. Non-spendable. Non-spendable are for prepaid expenses, our inventories, things that we've already invested money in that we can no longer spend on something else. Then we have our restricted, which is all of our restricted reserves that the council has approved. Assigned means you've taken part of your unrestricted fund balance or your unassigned fund balance and you have appropriated it for the next year's budget, or we have outstanding encumbrances that we have not expended yet. we've placed the orders, but they just haven't arrived by the end of the year. Then we have our unassigned, and I'm sorry, I meant to put unrestricted there also, because we're used to that term. And then our total fund balance. So you will see from 2000 to 2021, how they have changed. Then I show the adopted budget. From 2001 to 2022, showed the percentage of the unassigned to that. But what I want to point out to you, which I think is quite important, especially with this budget discussion, if you look at column M, this is the amount of appropriated fund balance that has been adopted in these budgets since 2000. So I do not want you to think that our 1.1